So I'd like to welcome Baroness Susan Greenfield. She's an international acclaimed neuroscientist, a broadcaster, speaker, and is the author of several books. I'm not going to mention them all, but I want to pick out at least 3 that are interesting for the topic, and that is ID, the Quest for Meaning in the 21st Century, Mind Change, how digital technologies are leaving their mark on our brains, and also Tomorrow's People, how 21st century technology is changing the way we think and feel. So welcome to the Online Stress Summit.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And to go straight into the essence of this year's topic, and that is, does high tech cause high stress?
I think the evidence is indicating that it does. Obviously, it's not a simple lab-based experiment that you can prove very simply. But I think if we take in the round the report of psychiatrists and educationalists and parents and legislators, as well as from the neuroscience, everything is indicating that the pressures, not exclusively so, but the pressures of the screen technology and the high technology are making people more depressed and anxious, yes, and stressed.
Okay, and are there other elements that you think in the future, you know, like, okay, that is today, the digital, you know, the online with the computer, the telephone, the iPads, but what about future technologies? Are you...
Okay, I think things are going to get, in a sense, more quantitative than they are now. That's to say, we might have the same technologies, but they will become even more sophisticated and extreme. And then we will qualitatively have new technologies. For example, subcutaneous implants, I can foresee. Already some people are using this as ID. In a sense, the phone, and there was a thing out just today in the United Kingdom about the addiction to mobile phones. The phone is already part of people's bodies. That's why people are addicted to it. You know, you hold it close to your face, you stare at it most of the time. You don't let it out of your sight or your grip. It's always with you. So in a sense, it's a very intimate part of you. And if someone else holds it, I think many would say that they feel uncomfortable if someone else holds their mobile phone, you know, whereas holding your laptop, you're not going to feel that troubled, yeah? So I think already it feels part of the body, and that's going to become, as it becomes ever more miniaturized and then under the skin, I think that will be a technology that again extends this notion of dependency and addiction to the technology.
Okay, what about, sorry.
Yeah, and that would lead to stress, because obviously if you're addicted to something, your constant fear is that you're going to lose it or it's not going to be there anymore. And so that will make people much more on edge.
I've also heard that, for example, they're considered now that the mobile phone is the 3rd hemisphere.
Yeah.
You know, that's how close it is to us. But I'm also worried about, for example, the digital implants that you're saying. It's about identification, but now also the stimulation of parts of your brain to increase memory, for example, which apparently has already been done, and you know, has results of 12% increase.
Yeah, my concern there is the starting assumption that this is a good thing. Yeah, if you take people whose brains are universally admired, let's say Einstein, Mozart, Shakespeare, you know, people that were phenomenal in their brain power, if you like, they didn't necessarily have good memories, so they were never even tested. And what was special about those 3 individuals is they were unique. They had a new way of seeing the world in their different sectors. And just by having a better memory, you're just turning yourself into a second-rate computer. A computer will always have a much better memory, if you define memory in that way, than we ever will. So it's a bit of a silly attempt to turn yourself into a computer when you could be a wonderful human being doing things that only human beings can do. So something called transhumanism, which is this notion you can enhance your abilities. And what I find it sad that people think that that is the way forward, that is what they want to do. Whether you can or you can't, I think we should discuss whether really that is the best way of expressing human nature and what we are about. And I think it's a very important discussion to have.
Yes, and in my presentations, I also say, from you have to be careful, who wants it? And everybody seems to, yeah, that would be great to have this increase in memory. But I always say so, but the downside of that, and it's one thing that you also mentioned in your book, ID, is the changes in your identity. Because of course, when you implant that, and you're changing neurological structures, also that meta structure that forms your ID, I can imagine that that will also be influenced, and that you're not the person that you used to be.
No, so. But in any event, a memory, one can have memories for facts, like the word for table in French or something like that. But the more interesting memory is episodic memory. That's to say, memory for your individual experiences.
Yes.
And they will change as you change. So it's not as if you can just download it, or it's an objective, isolated. If you go to the seaside with your aunt when you're 5 years old,
yes.
Let's say, that memory will change as you change, and as you have changing views of seaside, possibly a changing view of your aunt, possibly changing views of the innocence of childhood. It's not as if you can isolate a memory and it be like a simple fact, like the word for table in French. Yeah. So it's a rather, I think, naive notion to think that an implant will give you a better memory. Similarly, there's someone called Kevin Warwick in the UK, who's an electronic engineer, a very gifted engineer, but he mistakenly thinks he can have an implant in his arm. And his wife, it shows you what love can do, his wife has been persuaded to have an implant in her arm. And now he's claiming they'll feel the same things, they'll have the same consciousness. And that just, which I think, again, is a very naive way of thinking of things, of seeing the world. Do you know that?
Yeah.
People have the same stimulation.
I rather think they wanted to keep control over where they are, because it's probably connected with some kind of a map that they can know where to find each other. Well, I think that's really scary, to be honest.
But it's really, because you and I could have the same stimulation. We could see the same pictures. Doesn't mean to say we'll have the same consciousness.
Oh, so no, I know experience.
Implant in your arm as someone else doesn't mean to say you're going to experience subjectively the same thing. So.
Definitely not. Now, how did you come actually interested into this topic? This.
Yeah. Well, in a sad way, I now feel vindicated, because when I first got into this, and I'll tell you how in a moment, I inevitably attracted a lot of criticism from the so-called sophisticated technophiles who thought I was about to join the Amish almost. That was I was against technology and so. So the way it happened was, well, my background is as a neuroscientist, as you said, and I have a very wide experience of that, because I've taught medical students at Oxford University for some 20 or 30 years. So I had to teach all aspects of neuroscience and the brain. So I feel I'm across much of the issues relating to brain research in a very general way. My actual research is on Alzheimer's disease, but nonetheless, I have been interested in how the environment changes people because I initially did philosophy. I was very interested in what makes an individual the person they are, how you are different from me, how even if you're an identical twin, you'll be different from person, even though you have the same genes. So because of all that, I'm very interested in these things. And then the third factor was, I'm in the House of Lords, and what we have there are so-called debates. And the etiquette of the debate is that you'll only speak if you feel it's something to do with your subject or your area of expertise. And there was one debate, as it happened, on child pornography, which is not my area, I'm not a lawyer. But I thought I could bring to the debate my area of expertise, which was to tell the people in the House of Lords that the human brain is very sensitive to the environment. And if the environment was changing, as indeed it was, then the brain would change in ways that could be unprecedented, neither good nor bad, which is a pretty straightforward, simple syllogism. But when I said this, it had such publicity. It was things like Baroness says computers rot the brain. And I cannot tell you how much media attention suddenly, from this very straightforward, simple little speech.
Comment.
Yeah, so suddenly I got this. So, of course, that made me read more, think more, write more. So, although it's not my area of bench research, that's Alzheimer's, since that time, that was 2009, as you say, I've written various books. The most recent one, I don't know if you mentioned, is Mind Change, which was published in 2014. Yeah,
I did.
Yeah. So that's how it evolved. And of course, one thing leads to another. And especially now, I think, well, the reason we're having this conversation is people are suddenly, or perhaps at last, realizing that having children addicted as they are to gaming and to the screen, as someone has said, not me, he said, you might as well be giving them electronic heroin. And another report actually from the House of Lords shows, and this is if we're talking about the future, how these very clever designers can manipulate people to stay online for as long as possible. Yeah, and I don't think people have really realized that these are very clever people who know about schedules of reinforcement, as though they're rats pressing bars, knowing exactly how to keep people carrying on playing the game or carrying on a particular site. I don't think people realize just how effectively they are being manipulated. And I think that will only, if we're talking about future technologies, I think that will only get more extreme as things go on. People get more sophisticated and it will become more bespoke. So people could say, well, we've always been manipulated. We've always had adverts. We've always, but never before has it been so personal and so designed to an individual as it is now.
Yeah, and also the scope of it with AI, robotics, automation, all coming together. It is just amazing. You know, it just is mind blowing.
That's right.
It's scary.
So that's why I say, on the one hand, I feel pleased that I was vindicated, but I wish I had been proved wrong. I really wish I had been proved wrong.
Because my own story is the same thing. I was writing my book and Futurize became then the title Futurize Yourself, because I'm an osteopath, but you know, 3 questions saved my life 18 years ago. And I used to be in catering, you know, I used to be working in hotels. So I had a bit of a career change, you know, which started about 30, 31. You know, I'm 48 now, so you know, and really love what I do. But when I was writing that story down, how these questions saved me, I suddenly was confronted with, you know, this question from how do you see yourself in 10 years time? That is one of the questions that I was asked in when I was 29. And when I was writing that down, I was totally sourced from how is it possible today to imagine in 10 years time? And I was watching this video by Gerd Leonhardt, which is a futurist from Switzerland. And he put me face to face with something that we all know, but what you don't think about. And suddenly I was like, whoa, you know, this is going so fast, and change is stressful. You know, I see that in the patients that I have, which are a lot of people from the European Commission or from NATO, because I'm close to them, and they move with their families, for example, from their country to Belgium and leave to all their social structure behind. And suddenly I get to see them about 3 to 4 months later when they wanted to pick something up and their back is stuck. And then when I saw the list of life change units from Holmes and Rahe, when I got to know that in a psychology course, I said, hey, there is a relationship I can see between the life changes these people are going through, coming from another family, needing to adapt to a new environment, and the pains and the back pains or the neck pains that they have. And then I'm starting to think from, hey, but you know, when everything is changing exponentially, which is in the next 20 years, more changes than the last 300, then how is that going to affect my patients? And that is how I got interested as an osteopath and a body-centered stress coach into this technology. So, yes, please.
No, I was going to say, I think futurologists, and there's much done on all the technology and how it's going to change and how, but what people haven't really addressed at all is how a human being is going to respond to those things. Yeah. So quite often you'll have very upbeat, very optimistic, excited presentations and talks and predictions. You'll be able to do this and that, and this will happen, and you'll have these holograms and this. But what they don't then follow through and ask is, and what kind of person will that make you? What kind of feelings will you have? How will you learn? What will be your priorities? What kind of relationships will you have? All these things that are central to human well-being are not really addressed. And yet we know the brain changes to the environment. If the environment is that radically changed, we have to address all this glamorous, fast, impressive technology, exactly what it will do to us.
Yes, and that is what we're hoping with this day today, the online stress summit, to to really bring the different views. Yeah,
Sure.
because also what is going to happen, which technologies might help us to cope better with stress, but also the dangers of it. I want both. Both will be addressed. Also, addiction will be addressed. We have a speaker. We have an expert on that as well. Like, somebody who was addicted to gaming, and he's now in schools, really trying to share his message on how does that influence him as a person. So yes, so as a question to see how it will evolve further, I think we addressed it already a little bit. Is only going to be more challenging.
Yeah.
And to stay human instead of being transhuman will be, the challenge that we have to, proactively start to think about and implement some strategies that are, going to help us. So what would be for you the one tip to the audience that will, to prevent us from going that way?
Let me say first my reason for what I'm going to suggest. Yeah, I think what's very important in human beings up until now has been that we have a beginning, a middle, and an end to our lives, that we have a beginning, a middle, and end to stories that we like. Most of the activities that human beings have done up until now are sequences. They have beginning, middle, and an end, whether it's gardening or walking or eating or cooking or reading.
Yes.
So things that liberate us from the press of the moment, things that we evolve from being small children who just react to the moment, or animals that just react to the moment and lurch from one moment to the next. As you become an adult, you start to have a sequence to your life where the past informs the present, helps you plan for the future, where what you do has consequences. So you might want to rush and eat this big cake, but you will put on weight, so you hold back. Yeah? Or you want to gamble on some horse at the race, but you might lose your money, so you hold back. Now, this is the hallmark of adult human beings. Yeah, this sequences is where the present is informed by the past, giving you an individual view of it, and it helps you plan for the future. My worry with the current technology is that it is making us regress to being like small children, where you are just having stimulation of the moment. Yeah. Now, if that is the case, how can we reestablish a past and a future for people? Yeah, and I think there's several ways. That's the preamble. Several ways we can do it. So my tip is sequencing. So sequencing can be done in a very short-term way, like playing sport, where you have to do, when you serve at tennis, you have to do it in a certain sequence. You can't do it otherwise. And when Nietzsche talked about walking, aiding thought, because a thought process has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah. Whereas a feeling is just there in the moment. So when you move, so when you think, you end up in a different place from where you started. And someone once defined a thought as movement confined to the brain, which I think is really nice.
Yes, I like that one.
Following through with that notion then, the things that we could do to re-establish that so that we can think properly. In order to think properly, we need to have sequences and get used to beginning, middles, and ends and time frames. So things like gardening, very simple, where you can't rush how a plant grows. You can't change the sequence in which, you plant the seed, you pour the, it comes in a certain sequence. Cooking, where again, you can't change the sequence in which you do things in a recipe. Eating together, you can't have the pudding first and the soup at the end. So things that impose a sequence on you. Reading and writing imposes a sequence on you. Reading stories to your kids. So I think for children, there's three things. One is physical exercise, because that keeps down the body mass index, prevents obesity, and puts them in touch with all five senses, installing sequences. So physical exercise. Eating together, because as well as installing a sequence and a time frame, it actually, I'm no anthropologist, but it is a very, human beings, ever since we've been around on this planet, have ritualized the importance of eating together. The very word companion, compañeros, is with bread. Yeah. So this notion that nowadays people just eat in front of the screen, I find very sad, you know, that you're not sharing a meal together. And the third is reading stories, and especially if you have small children, because kids don't have the literacy skills. By reading to them, you're actually rehearsing having a longer attention span, and most of all, an imagination. And I think it's imagination that we are in peril of losing, which is that wonderful inner world. And there's an amazing study 2 or 3 years ago in the journal Science, very high science, where they asked young people just to sit still for 10 minutes. And they couldn't do this. And many of them preferred to give themselves electric shocks, yeah? Pain, rather than nothing. So that shows you we need to bring back to people an inner narrative, an inner world where you can sit still for 10 minutes and just think your own thoughts. Yeah? And I fear that we're in danger of losing the ability to sit quietly and having our own thoughts and our own view of the world in our own little private mind, which gives us a sense of identity. Yeah? And I think that can be enhanced again with kids if you just give them nothing to play with. If they're bored, you know, they just go outside and play, or you give them a box. And I could say to you, Tom, let's make up a game. Let's make up a game. And this box will be a castle. And now that is the most, it makes me tingle even now, to think of doing something like that rather than just sort of sitting in front of a screen. So
it reminds me of my youth.
yeah, exactly. So we see nowadays young people haven't got that. Many of them haven't been given that opportunity to say to each other, let's make up a game. Yeah. Imagine what that does for you as a person, the confidence it gives you, the fact that you're in control, the fact you've got a little identity, you're rehearsing a little life story is part of the game. Really valuable. And yet kids nowadays are just the poor little victims of these very clever people giving them the equivalent of electronic heroin. You know, and I think we need to do something. So they're my suggestions. Physical exercise. Okay,
I think it's wonderful. Yes. Yeah. And really what you're saying and what I like about it is it's sequencing. It's, you know, that people have to come up and say you know, create something yourself. So
That's
you're not really giving them the solution, but you're giving them the framework for the solution. And that is what I really love, because, you know, it's so important to let people be the creative, the creator.
There's a writer called Isaac Asimov. I'm sure you may have heard of him.
Yes, I heard of him.
In 1964, and this is online, you can look it up, he made the most amazing prediction. This in 1964, he was predicting what life was going to be like 50 years on in 2014. And he said the biggest curse was going to be boredom. And then he said, the true elite of mankind will be those who are engaged in creative work, for everyone else will merely serve a machine. For they alone will do more than serve a machine. And he said that in 1964.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to talk to you and to give this advice. And you know, hopefully we can stay in touch. And I'm really looking forward to the work you're doing or continue to do, and the next book. Thank you.
All the best. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.